Welcome back, Dungeon Jedi Masters. Today, we're going to be doing a villainous build. And just a little bit of a backstory of kind of how this came up within our Dungeon Jedi Master Discord. There's a link down in the description. If you're not a part of it, jump in. We've got some great discussions going on there. But one of those discussions was from Ray Zombie, one of our Patreon members, who was talking about a new villain build he had done for his campaign and looking for some feedback. And going through that, I realized I love making monsters, and I haven't made anything crazy new outside of for our Patreon adventures. So like, let's throw it in there. So what I did is I reached out to our Dungeon Jedi Master patrons, asked them what they were working on with their campaign, what villains were coming up, what's something they would need help with standing out a block, and got some amazing suggestions. But the one that I eventually went with came from one of our Patreon members and also plays on the Dungeon Jedi Master play-by-post game, Bigduv, and he suggested using the Null. And the Null are a group from his campaign who are almost like a religious sect. And they blame the galaxy's problems on Force users. So both Jedi and Sith blaming a lot of the galaxy's woes and problems on the strife and conflicts between these two groups, which is kind of a fun piece because a lot of Star Wars problems do start from some Jedi Sith shenanigans. So I thought those have a cool base ground to start with. And these groups basically kind of go through the core planets and use these anti-Jedi sentiment, anti-Sith sentiment to kind of build resources within the core, and they use these resources to start hunting Force users, bringing them to justice, usually by the way of murder. And these kind of their hunters are outfitted out with kind of either biological implements, like enhancements, or cybernetical enhancements. They're just definitely significantly enhanced to be able to go up against Force users and sometimes replicate some of their abilities. So I thought they were kind of a cool group to work with because first you get these are a group that are meant to hunt Jedi, so you get to have some fun things that you get to throw in there to show that off. And the nice thing too with this is while we've got some of the lore for kind of Bigduv that he brought from his campaign, these are ones that you can pretty much either keep that lore because there should be more anti-Force users groups with how much chaos they bring to the galaxy, or you can use them if you wanted to put this in the Imperial era. You could make these a squad of dark troopers that have been specifically enhanced and kitted out to hunt Force users, or like myself, I'm going to probably use them as well in my invasion campaign because they seem pretty close to a group within called the Crusaders, and I thought that we could have some fun with that. So I left the enhancements pretty vague for what brought them about. So these could be biological implementations, cybernetics. I didn't want to lock anybody in there in case they had different flavor. So feel free to flavor it as you like. With that, since we didn't flavor it, if you do want to do cybernetics and make it so they're a little bit more, and throw in like ion vulnerability. We didn't put iron vulnerability there because we wanted to have it open on that side. You can throw that in there. It will lower their CR a little bit, so be aware if you do. But just in case if you flavor them cybernetically and you want the mechanics to match the flavor, you can do that. But let's get into the build a little bit. So initially I was going to start off, I was just going to do one hunter, and I was like one Null warrior. But I'm like, that doesn't fit because these guys are cybernetically enhanced, but they're going after Force users, Jedi and Sith alike. That's going to be a tough order for someone that doesn't have powers. So I made them a group. So there's 3 Nulls that we have in there. We're going to go take a look at each of the different builds. And I pre-built these ones. I didn't want you guys to waste time, watch me type and all that. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of the builds, and then we're going to show you how to calculate the CR in case you had questions about making your own build too. So no worries on that side, but we'll kind of flip over there. And then a cool thing too for our patrons, we're going to have a link to our Patreon in the description. If you're a Patreon member with us, click that link, download the Nulls, and you can throw them in your own campaign. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, let's dive into it a little bit. Because yeah, with these, I wanted 3 different Nulls. So I wanted them to be kind of a hunter group. They kind of synergize well together, and they've got some fun abilities to specifically counteract Force users. And this, I'm going to put a link to this in the description too, because I feel like this is like key if you want to build an anti-Force user combat. Watch, if you're familiar with the KOTOR 2, I think it was KOTOR 2. Yeah, it was KOTOR 2. HK-47, which is a hunter-killer droid, very hilarious, calls everybody meatbags, but he has a really good video, and I'll throw that link in there, where he goes over how to hunt Force users. So going over some of the core techniques and different methods. He mentions overwhelming firepower, using weapons that can't be bounced back, using things to distract and throw the Force user off balance, and that's what we've done with these Null Hunters. These guys are designed to combat Force users, lock them down, put them away quick. So we're gonna go into that. So let's jump into the first one that we've got on there. Sweet. So first one we've got is the Null Trapper. So with this build, and these guys, I said they're three of them. They're meant to work in conjunctions. There's two of them are CR5, so 1800 XP. The third is CR7, 2800, 2900 XP. So with those, if you put all three into a fight, they'd be a little over deadly encounter for one level 5, or for a group of 5 level 5 PCs. So good fight on that side. Definitely what I'd work into an adventuring day, but nothing that wouldn't be too hard. CR-wise, now if you play these guys strategic, they can hit a little bit above their weight class with how they synergize amongst each other, and we're going to touch on that. So, the Null Trapper. This guy is kind of cool. So he, and one of the things Bigduv mentioned that they do is that they mimic force powers a little bit. So I have each of them kind of mimicking a different force power with either a once a day or a recharge ability they can do in addition to their attack. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Let's hit the top piece first. So this guy, he's a little bit of a hard to hit glass cannon. So he's CR5. He only got 40 HP, which for CR5 is pretty low, but he's got an 18 armor class. So he's going to be hard to hit, but if you get him a couple hits, he's going to crumble, which is good because he can dish out some damage. With these guys, I wanted them to have energy resistance. They're going to be fighting people with lightsabers, so they need to be able to kind of cut energy resistance and make sure that they can kind of get a few slashes from the lightsaber and not crumble. With this guy, high dex, all of them have high wisdom. If you're fighting Force users, you need to make sure that you're not going to fall for illusions and things like that. So he has high dex, but all of them have high wisdom. I also gave them immunity to Sonic and Poison, which is going to come up with the other two blocks. I wanted these guys to kind of work in sync, and I didn't want their abilities to... They're chosen, cybernetically augmented to work together to hunt Jedi. So I wanted them to be unaffected by each other's abilities, so we threw that in there for Sonic and Poison. The other big things, too, they're immune to the Charmed condition. They're fighting Jedi. They've been enhanced in some way that's changed their mind, or kind of protected their mind against the Force user assault. And then I gave them some good passive perception, senses, and all that side too, but we don't need to worry about all that. So with these guys, each of them has a piece of the disruption style and mastery. I think this one I gave it everything to, or most everything to. So they all have kind of a mixed match between those. If you've listened to our maneuvers or some of our other podcast episodes, I highly encourage using fighting styles and maneuvers as a way to make your villain stand out without having to put a ton of work in. And we did that for each of these guys. But each of them has that disruption style because it's catered to stopping Force users. Or it could be tech powers too, but for these guys, Force users. So with the Null Trapper, if they force a Force user to make a concentration check, they can and they pass it, the Null Trapper can use their bonus action to make them re-roll it. They can also take an attack of opportunity if a creature within 30 feet of them tries to cast a Force power. So some fun things they can do on that side. So that's the two this guy has. The other two have like different mixes and matches of those ones, and sometimes a little bit tweaked too. This guy also gave him distracting blow as a maneuver. That way he can create openings for his buddies. He's going to be kind of standing at more of a distance. He's more of a ranged guy than the other two. So he's going to be a little bit back off, kind of opening up resistances, or kind of opening up opportunities for attacks, and then also laying on some damage. And with these guys, so they got the Null enhancements too. So we've already talked about their resistance to energy damage and immunity to Sonic and Poison damage. The other thing they have too is advantage on Force saving throws. They're designed to hunt Jedi. They're going to have an innate bonus to fighting off Force user abilities. So give them that advantage on the save, and maybe they'll come through. So with these guys, they all have some cool refresh abilities, or either once a day or refresh abilities that they can use with their attack. And we're going to go over how I calculated that for CR2, just so you know. With this guy, he's the Entrapper. I want him locking down people and then dealing out damage. So once per turn, he can shoot out his Electrified Net, which is a ranged attack, pretty similar to Spider's Web, but has a little bit of damage to it. So they shoot that out. They entrap the Jedi. One of the things HK said is try to do things that distract them or slow them down. So we're going to do both. So they'll be restrained on a hit. This guy's got a decent to hit on that side. Which restrain, they fail dex saves automatically. Another thing there. And then they can't move and have disadvantage on attacks. And people have an advantage against attacks against them too. So cool way to start it off. They also have a lightning blast, which is kind of modeled after shock a little bit, the shock force power. Because one of the things Bigduv said, he wanted them to kind of have some things that emulate force abilities. So that lightning blast emulates that a little bit. But the thing I want to hit for this guy, that lightning launcher. So this imitates a weakened version of chain lightning that force users have. I think if you were building a creature to fight force users and you wanted to take some of their traits, Force Lightning and probably Chain Force Lightning would be one of the biggest ones you go after. So with this one, it's a recharge of 5 to 6. He can use this with his attacks. It basically uses his bonus action to do so. So he can make his Lightning Blast, Electrified Net, and then Lightning Launcher if he has it. So these guys can be pretty tough. But so we're going to go through and show you how to do the CR just so you know how to calculate it. With that though, so if they do... if he uses his lightning launcher, it's going to hit one target within 120 feet, and then the 2 bolts leap from it. So chain lightning's 3 bolts. We nerfed that a little bit for these guys. So 2 bolts leap from it within 15 feet of the target they first hit. Also another nerf, chain lightning's 30 feet. It's a level 6 spell, so I wanted to kind of amp it down a bit. So reduced it a little bit, made it a little bit, it's kind of similar in that it's a little bit less effective fireball damage or explosion damage, pretty much. Because we give them 8d6, but they can only hit 3 targets total with it. So, good on that side. DC 15 dexterity saving throw to save. Could get some damage out there. Now, this is one of those ones, if you play strategically, you can mess up your players, though. So this is what you can kind of tamper up or down, depending on how the crew's doing. Because if you hit them with that electrified net, restrain them, and then hit them with chain lightning, they automatically fail dexterity saving throws, being restrained. Get some fun there. So have some fun on that side. You could really kind of bring that into clarity and get to really just bang it out a little bit. With that, so that's kind of a quick look at the first guy. I wanted this one to be able to just really go up to bat with Jedi and Force users and just lock them down. Because you want, he's going to be opening up for the other two are kind of more close in range or kind of melee fighters, and this guy is going to be able to lock them in and just bang on them. Oh, and also I misspoke. I said restrained it automatically fails. Doesn't automatically fail for restraint. They have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. Apologize. So with that, if you did web them up and then shoot some lightning at them, they would have disadvantage, so most likely will fail. So still pretty cool on that side. Definitely not as crazy there, though. But yeah, we've talked about this guy. Let's go on to the next guy. So the Null Marauder. This is going to be the one that's right up in the face of the Jedi. He's going to be, or Sith. These guys hunt Sith too. So he is going to be kind of drawing a lot of their aggro. He's got a lower AC but more HP, so a little bit more survivability on that side. He's got some good strength, good saving throws on this too. He's more strength oriented. Same pretty much stat build out on that side, so we're not going to go out on it. One of the things he can do is he has aggressive bonus action, so he can move up to his speed towards a hostile creature he can see. He's melee mostly, so you want him to be able to get into range, do some damage. He also has crippling strike, so I always like to give one of my give him a maneuver to give him something fun that they can do. So he can do this 6 times per day. He adds a little bit of damage, but the cool thing is that he gives him 1 level of slow until the end of the next turn. So this guy, he can get right, especially if you've got like a counselor or a squishy force caster, He can use aggressive to bulldoze his way in, and then just hit those crippling strikes. He can do at least 2 per round, get that extra damage, but more importantly, crippling strike doesn't have a save. This is true for PCs too. But crippling strike, if it hits, 1 level of slow. You could stack those levels of slow up with that first turn, so they can't move until the end of their next turn, so they're stuck there. So you get until basically a turn after that. So 2 levels of slow, got him right there. You could just pound on him and keep him in position, which if you're hunting Jedi, makes sense. Jedi are very maneuverable, they're quick, they're fast. You want to be able to lock them down. So I thought that was an appropriate one for him. Also with this one, so he has part of the disruption fighting style. As I mentioned, I broke these out. So when a creature within 5 feet of them attempts to cast a power, they pretty much have to make a concentration check with 10 plus the power's level. On a failure, the power is not cast and they waste those points. So getting up, he's going to be up in their grills doing that. And then I also gave him the disruption mastery, but I nerfed his. The other guy could do it up to 30 feet, which is a true mastery form. This guy can only do up to 5 feet. So with that, he can pretty much, so if somebody tries to cast right next to him, he can smack him. And then after he smacks them, they can try to cast their power and they may fail too. So kind of cool. And then he's got the typical null enhancements. This guy's more melee. He's got a sonic pulse blast. So this one wasn't really modeled after a force power, but HK said one of the best things to use to go after force users is sonics. Because you can't deflect a sonic with your lightsaber. It's just all over. So sonic pulse made sense to me. And kind of along that side too, as I said, one of the things Bigduv wanted them to do was have things that mimicked force powers. So one of my favorite force powers for up close guy is the level 3 force repulse ability. But we've switched a little bit. He doesn't have force powers. He's just been and he's been enhanced in some sense. So we gave him sonic repulse. So with that, they release pretty much same thing as Force Repulse, 20-foot radius, 8d6 damage, knocks people back 5 feet if they fail. So so that pretty similar on that side. But one of the things I mentioned earlier, which we'll kind of come back to now, these hunters all are immune to sonic damage. They're meant to work together. They're not meant to have their friendly fire go off. So even if he does this right in range of his other 2 hunter buddies, they are immune. Sonic damage doesn't hurt them. They may get pushed back if they fail that dexterity saving throw, but they won't take a lick of that sonic damage, which I thought was fitting. They were built to work together. With this guy, too, he's got the Cortosis Blade, I should say. And for those who aren't familiar with Cortosis, it's a Star Wars metal, and it comes in a couple of different states, but one of the states that it can come in is a metal that if it hits a lightsaber, it'll cause it to short out. So I wanted to include that in there. If you've ever read the Hand of Thrawn trilogy, it played a pretty big role in that. I think that may have been where it was introduced to. So, cool. But I wanted, if they're made to hunt Jedi, Sith, most Jedi Sith use a lightsaber. Let's turn off their lightsaber. So they've got the Cortosis Parry. So basically, typical parry rules, they add the proficiency damage to an attack that would hit them. They need to be able to see the attacker. But if they are able to successfully parry it and the attacker is using a light weapon, the attacker will need to make a wisdom or charisma saving throw, basically whatever their force casting stat is. On a failure, their lightsaber's turned off. You see it kind of blade flicker and flare off, and it will be off until they can succeed on their that save, which they'll be able to make it at the end of their next turn. So I thought that was cool. I thought that was fitting. They've been kitted out to hunt force users. Let's turn off their weapons. Let's make it hard for them. Then finally, the Null Hunter. So the Null Hunter is a good one. This one's you got a mixture of mid to close range. Little bit lower AC, a little bit more hit points. This is another one that's at CR5, and that other one was at CR7 too. So that was a beefier. That's why he had more damage, more attack, and all that too. This guy is a little bit less. He's got the hunter style. We gave him some of the disruption ones, so he's got that one to force on concentration saves too. If he forces them to make a concentration save, he can use his bonus action if they succeed to re-roll. He also has the one where he can make an attack of opportunity against somebody that's casting a force user within 30 feet. We gave him evasion too. He's a little bit more dexterous. He's going to be able to avoid a lot of that damage. We also gave him weak point strike. So maneuvers, Maneuvers are great, so I gave him Medicine skill, which is a required proficiency for weak point strike. But basically, when he hits a creature with a weapon, he can try to temporarily daze the creature, force them to make a DC 13 con save. If they fail, they are stunned until the end of their next turn. And he can use that once per round, so he can stun people and just start taking them down, which, as HK said, and I'm going to really watch that video, great video for any Star Wars fan. But one of the biggest things is throwing Force users off their rhythm, and this will do that. And with stun, you do automatically fail dexterity saving throws. So not like restrained. Restrained is disadvantage. Got those two mixed up in my head when I was talking, but stunned, automatic fail. So if he stuns him, Force Lightning guy blast him, go for it. This guy, he does poison damage. So he's got a poison blast that he can shoot at somebody within 60 feet. On a hit, doesn't do too much damage, 2d4 plus 3. But the big thing with this one is it forces them to make a con saving throw. Then on a failure, they will gain the poisoned condition. So good on that side. Another distraction that gives them disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. So you want to kind of pile up these conditions and distractions, which is how these three enhanced individuals are going to be able to go toe-to-toe with Force users. He's got the Cortosis Blade and Parry too, but the cool thing he's got, because each of these guys, they mimic the Force power. We had the Chain Lightning, we had Force Repulse. This guy mimics the Plague ability, another level 3 Force power. In this one, this is a toxic cloud of synthetic plague particles. Each creature within a 20-foot radius of the Hunter, so right within there, must succeed on a DC 15 con saving throw. If they fail, they pretty much suffer the effects of plague. The only thing that's not on there is I didn't include the power piece, just due to not want to make it too long of a read for any DMs. But everything else out there is still pretty nasty. -2 AC, they can only make one attack, or use an action or a bonus action, but not both on their turn. And they get to repeat that save at the end of their next turn, or at the end of each turn until they pass. So, pretty gnarly on that side. These guys are kind of meant to shut down Force users, or even if you don't have Force users, these guys are a good shutdown party for pretty much any group, because they synergize well, and the more you play them together and kind of use their abilities strategically, the higher they can hit. And with that too, if a creature is immune to the poison condition, they automatically succeed, which is good. So if you have any droids in your party, they'll automatically succeed, or anybody else that's immune to poison. But the other thing, these hunters, these Null warriors, they're immune to poison conditions, so they automatically succeed. So it's another one of those ones where they can kind of get in close, work together without harming each other, kind of fighting over each other with their abilities. So that was a quick look at each of the builds and kind of the inspiration for them. The last thing we are going to do, just to show a little bit off of how to calculate CR, we're going to throw in the overall CR for the Null Marauder, and kind of show how that all goes. So let me transition my screen here. And basically, these are the CR Calculator 5e tools. If you put that in Google, it'll take you right there. And this is a great resource for calculating CR and kind of showing you what difficulty a being or villain that you're making is going to be. So the first thing we're going to do is I wanted him to be around 7, mostly because I wanted this to be a deadly encounter, or a little over deadly encounter for a group of 5 level 5 PCs. So I wanted him just to be 29, and then plus the other two 1800 guys. That fits a good spot, or CR5 guys. So with that, we've given him the CR7. We're going to put in his hit points too. So with this, you calculate his hit points, and one of the cool things with this too is if you don't like having to calculate the Constitution, I'm not going to change that now because I don't feel like I'm going to readjust it. If you do put the Constitution in, put it in first before you put your number in, because you can see if we hit it higher or lower, it changes it for you. So let me change that back to 70. So we gave him 70 HP. We gave him an armor class of 16. He has both sonic and poison immunity along with the resistance, so that's enough to throw him in the immunity class, which is going to change his CR. He does have saves. He saves at a DC 15. So now we're going to calculate his damage. So he could do, in one turn, The Cortosis Blade, which was a 2d8 plus 4, so average of 13. He can do that twice, so that's 26 per turn with his blade. So basically, the way you calculate this is you add the 26 times 3, so that would be 52, 78. So 78 damage from his blade. But one of the other things he can do too is he can do the Sonic Repulse attack, which is a recharge ability, and he can do that on top of regular attacking. So with that, that is 8d6. So on a failure, it assumes like 28 damage you take, so half damage. So as soon as you pass, you take that half damage, and then with it being a multi coverage attack or can hit multiple people, you assume 2 people fail. So that's 56. So we're going to add that 56 to our 78, and let me throw that in the calculator real quick. So 134 damage. Now, we're going to divide that by 3, because we want to get his average per round. And the reason we're dividing that by 3 is because the recharge is a 5 to 6. They're assuming that you're only going to get that once in 3 rounds, and they always calculate your damage to your first 3 rounds or your best 3 rounds. So that puts us at 44 damage for this guy per round. He doesn't have any vulnerabilities. He's got a saving throw and proficiencies. We gave him aggressive. We wanted him to be fast and get in close. We also gave him resistance. Now, this is one to keep an eye out for Star Wars 5e. I left it as is because these guys are synergized, so I didn't want to play with the CR too much. But in 5e, magic resistance covers pretty much the whole shebang. In Star Wars 5e, you've got both tech and force power, so it's a little less significant to have overall magic resistance. So sometimes I play with the CR with that and don't give it the full bonus it would. But for this time, because they're pretty optimized, we're going to give him that full bonus. And the last thing, he's got his parry. So we've got his 3 abilities in there, and you see we came out to CR7. So I run this before just to make sure my math and all that was right. This guy's a perfect CR7 too, which is nice. His offensive CR is 7, his defensive CR is 7. Due to his immunities, he's got a little bit of upped HP. Due to parry, he's got upped AC. With his damage per round, he can really get in there and do some damage. So cool tool. Make sure you use it when you're building monsters, and really make sure to put the expected CR. If you've ever noticed differences between Star Wars 5e CRs, whether it be my own or the ones on the website, and kind of what you put in there, if you've used that expected CR, it's because you're supposed to use that expected CR. So somehow it's based on the calculations, and if you don't, they look weaker. They'll get that higher CR, but actually be weaker than they're supposed to be. Don't know how it works. Don't ask me, but just make sure you use it for your videos, or your build, so they come out correctly. But that's a quick look at it. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm going to shoot this over to Bigduv too. Hopefully he'll have some fun with this in his campaign, and hope you guys have some fun with it too. If you're a Patreon, go to our Patreon, download this. You'll have a new cool thing you can bring into your campaign. And if you're not part of the Patreon, come through. Maybe become a supporter and pick this up, as well as our adventures or how-tos and a number of other resources that we post monthly for our Patreon members to just help them get a DM within the world of Star Wars 5e. But that's all, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. Drop a like, drop a comment, subscribe if you haven't, and may the Force